certain expenditures for the poor. I don't have it in front of me. It's education and Medicare. Some of these programs increased, were decreased in the 90s or increased very little.
Increased in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, increased. But then Bush came around. He spent quite a bit money on these programs with the Republican Congress. Then we had the following 2 years Pelosi and Reid, and then Obama came around. Now, everybody, Republicans and Democrats, everybody says the 90s were great in terms of budgeting. Republicans take credit, hey, we had the Congress first time in 40 years, look what we did. Democrats say, hey, we had a Democrat president, we balanced budgets. If everybody is so happy with the 90s, why should we not revisit those budgets? No, I'm not saying we should go back and spend now the same number we spent in 1998. I'm not stupid. I understand the population grew, the economy became bigger. But the budget the last 10 years increased so much. Why should we not...
Let me answer your question.
Yeah.
This will take a little time because you have to know that some of what you said is correct and some of it is just ignoring certain things.
Okay.
First of all, the Republicans talk a good game about the balanced budget all the time, that deficit. But they really don't seem to care about it. What they care about is smaller government. And they're quite willing to have larger deficits if they'll cut taxes and ultimately, therefore, a smaller government.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they talk about the deficits and sometimes they say it doesn't matter. That's a quote from Cheney. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're constant and consistent about is less taxes and ultimately smaller government. That's what they really care about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, looking at the history, and let me give you a little history, some figures. when Reagan took office in January of 1981,
mm-hmm.
the national debt of the United States, George Washington through Jimmy Carter, was just under $800 billion. It was 794 to be precise.
Yeah, and Reagan more than double that. Yeah.
No, he did more. Reagan then had a huge tax cut, and unlike today's Republicans, he realized his tax cut was too big. He then had two tax increases, but the net of the three of them was still a large cut.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And he increased military spending sharply.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time Bush left office, Bush won,
mm-hmm.
in the 12 years of the Republicans, the national debt was $4.3 trillion, from $800 billion to $4.3 trillion.
Okay.
When Clinton took office.
Yeah.
When Clinton took office, the budget deficit that year was almost 300. It was $290-odd billion.
Okay.
292 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this because that's when I came into office too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was projected to go by the mid-90s to $500 to $600 billion deficit a year. We passed Clinton's Budget Deficit Reduction Act in the spring of 1993 with not a single Republican vote. And they were getting up there and they said, this is the largest tax increase in history, it'll cause a huge recession, etc. The reality was, it was about half expenditure reductions and about half tax increases.
Yeah.
They called it, the Republicans called it the largest tax increase in history, which is correct if you didn't count inflation. If you counted inflation, it wasn't the largest tax increase, it was the second or third. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It was a substantial tax increase and a substantial budget cut. From the moment we passed that in 1993, the budget deficit started going down every year instead of up. Then the Republicans took over Congress, and in 1997, now they tried to sharply cut budgets for Medicare and Medicaid and education. Clinton resisted that. You remember there was a government shutdown.
Yeah, they shut down in 1995, yeah.
It was 1995. In the end, there was a balanced budget act of 1997 where we made some further budget cuts. We didn't touch taxes.
Yeah.
But the budget deficit kept going down, probably because of the 97 act. It went down a little faster than it would have had we not done that, but it was going down already from the 93.
Mm-hmm.
And by 1998 or so, it actually crossed into a balanced budget.
Yeah.
We had 4 years of balanced budgets.
Yeah, I know the numbers, and then Bush came in 2001. I know the story.
But not only that. In 2001, they were predicting that we would eliminate the national debt, which was then about 5-point-some-odd trillion. We're going to have a $5.6 trillion surplus over the next 10 years, and by 2012, we would eliminate the national debt entirely. That was the prediction.
Yeah.
Alan Greenspan, in fact, testified in favor of the Bush tax cut by saying, we shouldn't eliminate the national debt for various reasons. It's a bad thing to do.
Yeah, because
Okay.
we should have. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had the 2001 and 2003 Bush tax cuts. Very large tax cuts. That probably caused about 40% of the current deficits.
Okay.
Then you had two unfunded wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. The first wars in American history where you didn't increase taxes to pay for them.
Yeah.
Pay for them entirely on your credit card. Then you had the Medicare prescription drug
part.
procedures,
Yeah.
again not paid for.
Yeah.
And by the way, when Bush came in, the Republicans took over Congress, they eliminated the pay-go rules the Democrats had.
Mr. Congressman, can I?
Right, but let me just say this. Since 2001 until now, we've had a huge turnaround. We now have a $15 trillion national debt instead of, we're going to pay off the national debt. Non-defense discretionary spending. You know what discretionary spending is?
Yeah, sure. You can spend accordingly. Yeah, it's your discretion.
It's not Medicare, Medicaid.
It's not mandatory. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Non-defense discretionary spending adjusted for inflation and population has not increased at all since 2001. Not by a nickel.
What?
It has not.
Even with the last 3
In the last year, 2 years, what has happened? And Paul Krugman had a column on this. You can look it up about 3 days ago. What is increased? The spending that has increased is unemployment insurance,
food stamps, very much. Yeah.
Why? Because when you get into a recession.
Okay, Mr. Congressman, let me. I see that this number. All the numbers you gave me, I knew already by heart. I was listening because you're a congressman, and I don't want to shut you down. So I was listening again to give people to hear the full story. But the last number is very interesting in terms of non-discretionary spending. But let me go back a minute. First of all, Ronald Reagan, if you look at the revenue to the Treasury from 1981 through 1990 in dollar terms, it grew actually faster from 1991 through the end of 2000, despite the fact that the 80s we had 3 recessions, whereas in the 1990s we didn't have any recession. The 1990 recession we had finished in March 1991, even before Clinton announced that he's running for office. By the time Clinton came into office, the unemployment rate was heading down. We had a month, 100,000 jobs. That's an economy of 20 years ago. So by the time you guys passed the Clinton budget in August or September, I was maybe 8 years old back then, but I studied some numbers. The time you passed that, the economy was booming. President Obama, this country was
starting to, yes.
It was already booming. The time Clinton walked.
All right, fine. So.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, but if you look at the actual tax rates. Maybe the Republicans want to call it the biggest tax increase in history, but if you look at the tax rates, we have now, even before the Bush tax cuts, in Clinton years, we had tax rates closer to Reagan than we had in the years before, and still we balanced the budget.
Not true. Under Reagan, marginal tax rates for very rich people went as high as 70%. Under Clinton, they were at 39.6, the highest.
No. Maybe when Reagan walked into office, but he cut it to which number?
He cut it to somewhere in the high 50s.
High 50s, and then I think it went down to.
Clinton was 39.6.
Clinton moved it from 35 to 39.
Something like that.
And we still balanced the budget. So this is what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that we have today tax rates, even before Bush's years, we have tax rates similar to many segments.
You can't look at this is a much longer discussion.
Okay.
I've got to go vote in about 3 minutes.
Okay.
But let me just say this: if you look as a percentage of GDP,
that's a cheating way to count the numbers. I don't like it, Mr. Congressman. It's because
way to count the numbers, you say?
It's a cheating way to count the numbers. It's not kosher.
Cheating way?
It's a cheating way, yeah. Because
why is that?
Because counting the spending as a percent of GDP gives all sides to make whatever argument they want and to back it up. But if
That's
you
true.
Okay, listen, because if President Bush, you know well, Congressman, you know well, Mr. Congressman, the 2007 budget, the last Republican budget, that deficit was $170 billion. Again, that's without the money we took.
I don't know that, but okay.
Okay, that's without counting the money that we took from Social Security. But so that one. So in other words, if President Bush would have spent in his Republican Congress years on education, on infrastructure, and Medicare, the same rate of increase that we had under Clinton, President Bush would have given us a few balanced budgets. I have studied the numbers, and this would have happened even with the tax cuts, which the taxes for the rich over 10 years. Oh, wait, he spent like a Meshuggah. I agree, but what I'm saying is spending was his problem.
What he spent on, the changes in spending after 2001, until the recession hit in 2008.
December 2007.
Okay, fine. Prior to that, the changes from 2001, the increases in 2001, were in the military, because we basically doubled the military budget, not counting Iran and Afghanistan, plus Iran and Afghanistan, plus the the Medicare.
He increased money on education.
We did not increase, adjusted for inflation and population. We did not increase discretionary spending, non-defense discretionary.
We did. We spent a lot of money on education. You look up the numbers back to back. The 6 Republican Clinton years, 6 Republican Bush years. So what I'm applying
for inflation and population, overall non-defense discretionary spending did not increase from 2001.
Okay, but if you go according to inflation, then these expenditures decreased on the Clintons' watch, and the Democrats were okay with it. So why are Democrats not okay now with controlling some of these expendenders? Oh, it's a long. I understood you explained because we need the stimulus.
Hold on, I got to answer the question because I got 5 minutes left on the vote. I got to get there.
Okay.
There are several things. Number one, in my opinion, and I can't speak for all Democrats, and I probably disagree with a lot of Democrats, and in my opinion, we're spending too little on many of these different accounts. I'm not talking about specifically education because I don't know that offhand.
Mm-hmm.
But on many different, on infrastructure, we're spending much too little. For example, pre-Reagan, we used to spend almost 3% of GDP.
Oh, here we go again with the GDP. Oh my God.
It's the only way. Anyway, let me just finish. I don't want to have an argument over GDP some other time.
Okay.
Pre-Reagan, we used to spend about 3% of GDP on infrastructure. Now we spend about 1%. We're spending much too little on infrastructure. Our infrastructure is falling behind. It's going to, it hurts our economic competitiveness with other countries and so forth and so on. As one example, we have to spend more on infrastructure. We have to spend more on a lot of different things. Second of all, completely separate from that, from the necessity of spending on any given thing, which you have to obviously have to look at. If you want to get out of a recession or a depression, which is caused overwhelmingly, as this one is, by a lack of aggregate demand, by the fact that people aren't spending money to buy things, and therefore people aren't being hired to make them and to sell them and to market them and so forth. Unless you want to wait 8 to 10 years for the economy to get through all the pent up debt overhang, you got to do 2 things. Neither of which we're really doing. One, you got to deal with the mortgage crisis, so people feel they can spend money again. And I'm very critical of the Obama administration for not doing that either. They're not doing that. And 2, you got to have government spending to put money into the economy so people have money to increase aggregate demand. There's no other way of getting out of a depression. And what they're doing in Britain and in Germany, which is what the Republicans would like to do here, and what Obama seems halfway of a mind to do, which is to say, let's cut expenditures in order to cut the budget deficit, let's have austerity. That just leads to less aggregate demand, less economic growth, more unemployment, and bigger budget deficits.
Okay, Mr. Congressman, I'll let you off the hook this time. You are very accommodative to our needs there. You gave us a lengthy interview, and this is, to somewhat an endless discussion.